Pat Lencioni, everyone, huh? Great job, Pat. I always love your talks because it's such a good balance of faith that we see that just shines from you, and also how you're using that faith in the real world in such a practical way. And so I really like that balance.
Thank you.
We've had a ton of questions come in, so I'm flying through them, trying to still read them and write them down.
By the way, I had no idea that that Tom Brady was in Pride and Prejudice. That was very interesting.
It was a guest appearance. Yeah.
I learned something during that.
A lot of people don't know that.
And then he used a hair crimper.
The crimper he should have gotten, but he didn't, and that's okay. I'm just kidding, guys. I'm on your team. By the way, we've got questions for our tiebreaker at the end. So don't go anywhere because we're ready. We're gonna win or lose gracefully. Okay, back to this. This is a big one, okay? Can you explain the juxtaposition of fully trusting God care for us and investing in monetary securities such as insurance?
No.
Okay.
No, I mean, isn't that the question? You know, it's like trust God.
Yeah.
You know, what's the saying? You know, work like it all depends on you and pray like it all depends on God.
Yep.
And I think, though, that can be dangerous. Mm-hmm. I think the key is every decision you make, you have to pray about. And because, I mean, I don't know how much money is enough. You know, my wife and I struggle with this all the time. Should we give money to charity? My wife is so much more generous than I was. She grew up different. You know, I grew up Catholic, and we didn't have a lot of money. So our idea of giving money was, you know, $10 in the basket. It was like a tip for the priest. Like, hey, you gave a short sermon, Father. Here you go.
Extra $5.
And one day at our church, just this last year, they had me get up and give the appeal because we're going to build an adoration chapel.
Cool.
So yeah, isn't that beautiful?
That's great.
Adoration, wow. So I got up and I gave the appeal and I asked people, okay, write down and, you know, give as much as you can, everything. But I wasn't sitting next to my wife when they made the decisions to hand in their cards. And she literally wrote down 10 times more than I was going to write. I was like, what are you doing? And she says, well, we're supposed to give till it hurts, right?
But that really hurts.
Yeah, I was like, yeah. And so I don't know what the right answer is. And I don't know what I'm supposed to, but I know this, if I take it to God and to prayer, and not like this, God, what should I do? You got an answer right now? Go to God, kneel down and say, how much of this insurance do I, how much money do we need to put away? How much of it is for charity? And really seek His will. Yeah. There's no great formula. I think it's always just submit yourself to God's will and do your best to follow that. That's what I would say.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's got to be rooted in prayer. Right. Absolutely. Pat, how do you balance your faith with your love for your family?
I think this is probably one of the hardest things. I will tell you that I think that one of the hardest things in life for a Christian is not to love your family in the wrong way. I mean, the truth of the matter is I love my family so much, and as a result, I worry about them. And my sons will tell you that they'd like me to stop doing that. And what I have to realize is they are God's children first. And I am here to help them, but they're not mine. And I can tell you this, as I've started to get over my pride as a person, I find that the devil, who's real, as we all know, is now trying to get me to worry about theirs. He knows the devil uses your vulnerabilities against you, and we're all different, and he knows that mine is that I love my family so much that I would do anything for them, that he tries to use that to make me worry. And God wants me to trust not just myself to him, but them as well. And for those of us that are devoted to our families, that they can become an idol.
Yeah.
You know, and you see this when you go, as you have kids and you go to soccer games and you realize, oh my gosh, these people, it's like they're manufacturing these little soccer bots and they're traveling around and going on, and you realize you're worshiping this. By the way, I will tell you this. youth sports and fantasy football are dangerous idols. I know that sounds crazy, like, dude, I mean, we're talking about pornography here. Youth sports and fantasy football are becoming idols in the world.
Yeah.
And so it's something to be careful of.
Absolutely. You mentioned the idols, and there's a question here I'm going to kind of reword a little bit. The question is, I mean, you're a very successful man, right, in the world.
You're a very handsome man.
Thank you.
How do you respond to that?
I've never had another man tell me that. But it felt nice.
It felt good?
Yeah. So you're very successful in the world. How do you kind of juggle all that success and not turning that into an idol when you're trying to do the Lord's will and find your identity and value in Him? But you have found a certain level of identity and success in the world.
It is, you cannot indulge it. So again, it's like I'm not going to get a Porsche, and not that if somebody has a Porsche, that's a terrible thing, but it's not my thing. And I'm not going to buy the world's biggest house and live like that. But it's the little indulgences of being successful that are the dangerous ones. And the truth is, everything is God's, right? He gives you all these opportunities. And I honestly think that He's given me success so I could have this platform to speak to people as a Christian, to say it's not about that other stuff.
Yeah.
And when I meet a CEO and they're like, oh, you're a famous author, and then they'll see my little rosary band on my arm, and they'll say, what is that? You're into your faith? And I'm going to go, oh yeah, it's the center, it's my whole life.
That's awesome.
I think that's why I'm here.
Huh.
And so, but it's the little things, like when all people will say, hey, you did great, that book. And I say, well, praise God, you know. And they, well, no, but this is what they say. But you got to take some credit. And they really want me to go, well, yeah, I'll take some. It's like, oh, it's all His.
That's awesome.
So it's the little things.
Yeah.
It's the little things. So I don't think I'm in danger of the biggies, hopefully. But it's the little ones are just as dangerous.
Thanks for being such a good example for us in that, because it's one thing to hear it, it's another to see it.
That's all I can do.
Let's see, that's a little similar. Here's a good one. If it isn't material things like success and power, to what do we fill our God-sized hole in our hearts?
Well, it's St. Augustine said it, right? Our hearts will never rest till they rest in God. And again, we don't need to come up with new things. We just need to be reminded of things. So St. Augustine was at the 3rd century. He said that. Okay, or is it the 5th? I don't know. I'm not sure. But whatever, we don't need to, there's not a lot of new wisdom that we need. Jesus told us what it's going to take to be truly at peace. And the biggest danger we have today is that the world is continuing to tell us it's other things. I work with CEOs and I work with professional athletes, and it is so amazing when you realize that they're so hurting and empty. And somebody reminded me, the guys from Madison last night, they said there was that clip of Tom Brady who was on 60 Minutes about 8 years ago. And they said to him, so tell us what it's like to be so successful. And he goes, well, you know, we won 3 Super Bowls and I got all this money. And I just got to ask myself, there must be something more. And he went to Catholic school, and I wanted to shake the TV and say, it's Jesus. But he said it like an open-ended question, like, I don't know what else there is. I'm married to a supermodel. I got Super Bowl rings and all this money, but I got to think there's something more. And of course there's only one thing more. Yep. It's the only thing that matters.
Isn't it interesting that they all come to that conclusion, though, you know?
Oh, and boy, when I work with these CEOs, you know how you know they're like that? Is when they don't like to go home on the weekends. Because they know that when you go home on the weekends, I think the holidays must be so hard for people that are living for material goods and for fame and fortune, because those are those long stretches of time when there's nobody around them to work. And a friend, a client of mine, and God bless her, and hopefully, you know, God has a way, and we've got to pray for everyone, but she was having her twins, and she was emailing from the delivery room because she had work to do. And I just remember thinking, and she was one of them that said, you go to church, huh? You really do. And it's just amazing when you meet people that seem to have everything, and they know they're missing the one thing that matters.
You're speaking truth, Pat. Now, the hard thing, and I'm getting a lot of text messages of people entering business or studying business, or not text, tweets, and they're asking for that practical advice. You've done it. You're doing it. What advice can you give them to continue living out their faith in the world of business?
I think that it's that wonderful axiom, I don't know who came up with it, that said God's plan for you. First of all, never say, what do I want to do? That's what people will always ask you. College counselors say, what do you want to do? And the right answer is, what does God want me to do? And of course, when I first met yeah. Because he has a plan for our life, and our job is to find it and conform to it, to discern his will, not create our own. Those sound like subtle differences. They're black versus white. And I remember when I met Matthew Kelly the first time years ago. I read his book like many of you have, and I got to meet this guy. So I went so I met Matthew, and we were having dinner. And I said, Matthew, I just feel bad. I feel like I should be moving to a foreign country and building houses for people and feeding them. He goes, are you good at building and cooking? I said, no, I'm terrible at it. Then that's not what you're supposed to do. Yeah. And I was so relieved because I thought I have to do something I hate in order to be, And the thing is in life is find out what you're passionate about, because God gave you that passion, but find out the intersection of that passion with what the world needs. Because, you ask every kid in the world, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you know what they say now?
A focused missionary.
A focused missionary, exactly. And I say, no, it's a video game designer. That's what kids say. Yeah. Video game designer. It's like, that's what the world needs. No. And what you have to find out is, because a focused missionary there can be some that love to meet people one-on-one. And if that's what you're great at, then you should be that kind of a focused missionary. There's Nick, the cameraman, who loves video. And so Nick is a missionary through his camera.
Yeah, and he's dang good at it.
Oh, he's amazing.
Yeah.
And I remember when I met you 2 years ago, I didn't realize you worked for Focus. And I was like, man, they hired a guy that's like a professional comedian and talk show host to do this. But the truth is, you're using your talents and passions, but in a way that's actually meeting the needs of others. Sure. And that's what it is. So ask yourself, God, what is my Myers-Briggs type? How did you build me? What do you want me to do? What do I love doing? And what does the world need? Yeah. And you'll find that intersection, and that's where you want to be.
That's it. That's awesome.
That's it.
That's perfect advice for those of us who are seeking God's will. This is a great question, and it says, how do you give similar advice, but to a secular audience? So you have the answer of your faith and discerning God's will. What about a secular audience, or for those that might not know Jesus in the same way?
I like to tell them to search for their energy spot. No, I don't do that, Man, you hear weird things out there, And you got to meet people where they are, but you also got to be willing to speak truth in love when it's time to do that. Yeah. And if you wait for a time where there's no risk, you will never do it. But you don't look for the risk just to do it. Mm-hmm. And this has been hard for me. I will tell you this. So I've been a practicing Catholic and going to Mass for many years. I would say about 8 or 9 years ago, I had a reversion in deepening my faith. And I think that reversion hopefully continues every day. Mm-hmm. But I used to feel really defensive and uncomfortable talking about my faith in front of secular audiences. And I think it was because I was afraid they were going to judge me or reject me or dislike me. And then one day I realized, well, it would be okay if they did. And then I could share it with them out of joy. Mm-hmm. And they received it better. Yeah. The truth is, I wasn't very good at sharing it because I was too worried about what they would think. But then if I just met them and tried to meet them where they are, I could share it with them without any fear. So what's the message I would give to an audience that's different than this one? I would probably say, well, this is who I am, and this is how I live, and this is what I believe. And what's interesting? So I gave a talk at a very big software company in the Seattle area. Nobody's heard of it, I'm sure. And when they invited me to go up there to speak, they said, we'd like you to come up and talk to a bunch of our employees, but we've seen your books and your tapes, and we noticed you're a Christian. We just don't want you to use the G word. Google.
Google.
No, that's what I thought. Google. No. They said they don't mention God. So this is a moment of truth. I'm sitting thinking, really? And then I said, here's the deal. I'm not coming up there to evangelize, but I am who I am. Mm-hmm. So I cannot promise you that my faith won't be evident in what I do. But I'm not coming up there to take advantage of this situation. You're going to pay me to help talk about teamwork or leadership. Yeah. I'm not going to stick it to you by getting, But I said, but I'm not going to promise that I can't be me. And they said, okay, that's okay. So you know what I did? At one point we were talking about job satisfaction. And I said, I don't think God made us to be miserable in our work. And then at the end I said, God bless you. People came up to me and they said, thank you for witnessing. That's all I did. And sometimes that's all we do.
Yeah.
So, St. Francis of Assisi never said, that's a misattributed quote, always share the gospel and if you must use words.
Yeah.
Of course our actions have to lead.
Yeah.
But people want to know, always be prepared to give an account for the...
Absolutely.
And so sometimes it's just a small way.
Yeah.
And how many times have you done it and people said, oh, thank you for saying that? Mm-hmm. We're all kind of in this world thinking, I'm not allowed to witness. And then when you hear somebody does, you think, oh, I'm so glad they did. Mm-hmm. And so don't be afraid to do it, and don't be offended if somebody is uncomfortable. That's probably because they need to hear it.
They've got something going on. What about on a daily basis in your work? How do you integrate faith in business decisions or in the environment of your company?
I'm leaving. See you later. That was offensive. No, I'm gonna get my water.
I had no idea what you were doing.
I know. So how do you do this in our work? Let me tell you something. So I have a consulting firm. We've been around for 18 years. For the first 15 years, I didn't really actively incorporate my faith in my work. Everybody knew I was Catholic, and some of them went, but we didn't talk about it because I was too uncomfortable, and I didn't want to make them uncomfortable. This is what happened. Then one day, I heard about Matt Maher, and I heard some of his music. This was like 3 years ago.
Okay.
And I went to the conference room, picked up the phone, called him. He and I had one of those.
Because that's normal.
Of course, yeah. That's how it works.
That's true.
And he and I had this connection. See, Matt Maher and I both do a ton of work in the non-Catholic Christian world. Mm-hmm. And we just so wanted to share our faith with the Catholic world. So I called him, and he and I just connected right away. I hung up the phone. I called my staff into the conference room, and I told them I was probably going to be leaving the company. And I'm the founder,
Yeah.
And they were like, what? And I said, I've just talked to this guy named Matt Maher. I want to live my faith. I want to do it through my work, and I don't want you guys to be uncomfortable. And so I think I should just let you guys stay and run the firm, and I should go off and do my own thing. And some of the people in the room were crying. Some were really angry. Others were clapping. And
Did you fire them later?
Yeah, they got fired the next day. You're out of here. But that day is when my office said, if the only way you can share your faith is to leave, then we want you to bring it into the office.
Wow.
And so can you imagine 15 years and I didn't have the courage to do that? My wife started teaching Bible study to the women there, doing this Walking with Purpose women's Bible study, which is great. Mm-hmm. No women in the room or they'd be going, woo, And we talk about faith, we pray before meals, we incorporate, and we're all in different places in our faith journey, but it's now part of the air we breathe, and it's changed everything. It's changed everything.
What about your business role models? Who do you look up to, especially in the business world?
God bless you, God bless you. I will tell you this, the best leader I've ever encountered is Curtis Martin. I'm not saying that because I'm at a Focus conference. What has happened here, and I love what he said. I heard him speak last night. He said it's all the grace of God and cooperating with God's will. And he said something wonderful last night. He said, I'm not surprised by what I see at Focus, by these 10,000 students here. Because we knew if we with God's grace, we could do this.
Yep.
What he has been able to, and I've seen Curtis in meetings, and he is not perfect. There is not a perfect leader out there. but there's not a leader that I look to that I think that is better than him.
Wow.
In the secular world, there are, the best leaders are not at the biggest companies. They're not the most famous ones. Because most of the famous leaders wanted to be famous. And that's the beauty of Mother Teresa. She never said, so I'm going to start these orphanages and I'll get the Nobel Prize and someday people will walk around with cards of my picture on them. And for every Mother Teresa, there's hundreds of other wonderful priests, nuns, and leaders who you don't know about. So the very best leaders in the world are in small, medium-sized companies. They're serving the way they're supposed to serve. And I wish I had a great name on the tip of my lips for one of them. I work with Southwest Airlines. The leaders at that company are fabulous. I work with Chick-fil-A. The leaders at that company are fabulous. So those are some of the folks. They're usually not famous, though. They're usually not famous.
So the kind of tagline to Focus is launching college students into lifelong Catholic mission. We are here to build Catholic missionaries to go out into the world. And you've talked about how you do it a little bit. You're looking at, 5,000 missionaries, right before you. They're not Focus missionaries, but they're missionaries in the world. What advice do you have to them to share Jesus in their life to the world?
It's the thing, I wish I was more profound, but I'm not a theologian. And I would just say, Jesus said, be not afraid. And be not afraid to get rejected. That doesn't mean you're, hey, how can I go and get in somebody's face and get rejected? But be not afraid. And your interior life first. That's the thing. Well, you can get so caught up in ministering to others that you forget to do interior prayer. And that's why adoration is so important. So I would say, what I would say is this. Here's what I would say to you all. So we're all going to die one day. And we don't think about that when we're young. But I'm 49 now, and so I'm thinking about it more. I'm halfway to 98 right now. And
it's a good way to think about it.
Yeah, it's pretty makes you feel good.
It really doesn't do that.
Yeah. And here's what I would say. Do you ever read about the early church and the saints, and you think, wow, that must have been something to be around then when the church was starting? That's the early church. What does that mean? The people in 300 AD thought that the first 100 years was the early church? Yeah, that must have been something. And then in 500, we think of that as the early church. They thought the first 300 years. We are still in the early church. And you are, just because you're not wearing sandals and walking dirt roads, we are still the apostles of the early church. And it lives in your parish. And so your college campus and the parish where you go and where you grow up and where you move on to, that is the church. And go out there and be the saints of modern day. I just want to be a saint. I don't want to be known as a saint because that's the wrong reason. I just really want to live the life of a saint. And I think that being at a place like this makes me think that, as imperfect as I am, maybe there's hope. So that's my encouragement to you is, at the end of your life, Peter Kreeft wrote a great book called Jesus Shock. And he quotes somebody, and I can't remember who it is. Yeah, it's a great book. And he says, at the end of our life, he quoted somebody else said this, the only regret we'll have is that we didn't live the life of a saint. And as I get closer to that place, I'm convinced that that's true. Why didn't I choose to be a saint every time I had a chance?
Pat, you're just such a good example and model for us. Again, being in the world, not of the world. And thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure. God bless you, Steve.